Sometimes you see these lists people make where they name off what they think are the most common foods in West Virginia. And those lists always include things like ramps and pepperoni rolls,
Yeah,
slaw dogs,
common.
and I mean, all of those things do make a lot of sense, but hardly ever do I see pasta and sauce on any of those lists.
Yeah, never.
And like I don't really know why that is, because so many recipes for spaghetti sauce have come here with Italian immigrants and have been such an important part of the local community and our food scene for such a long time. And neither one of us are from Italian American families, but I grew up very much loving spaghetti and sauce. That's the one dish that I always wanted my mom to make whenever I came home from college. It was like if we had a community fundraiser of some sort, it would be a spaghetti dinner. And for a lot of special occasions, my family went to this spaghetti house in Charleston called Leonora's.
Yeah, and there are quite a few spaghetti houses near us here in the Clarksburg area, which we really love.
Love them.
And that's kind of our go-to. If we're going to go out to eat, we'll usually end up at a spaghetti house.
Yeah.
But
and
we
we'll
also
take you there if you come to visit us.
Yeah, that's where we're going to take you if you come to visit us. But we also make a lot of pasta and sauce at home.
Yeah, we have a recipe that we really love for this thick and meaty sauce. And, it's especially delicious if you can make it with some fresh hand-cut noodles.
Mm-hmm.
But it is a different sauce than what you get if you go to a restaurant. It's not supposed to mimic any of those. But if we're cooking at home and if we're not going out for spaghetti, you could say.
One could say.
One could say it's, the next best thing. Back in the early 1900s, there were thousands of Italian immigrant families who came to West Virginia, and after all these years, we are still blessed with all these rich Italian culinary traditions. And the traditional spaghetti house is kind of one of the mainstays. It's a very common establishment in this part of the state. And all of these places, they've got so much charm, they've got so much family history behind them. And, we love to go to all these places, but we do find ourselves at one much more than all the others. And it's this cool old spot in Clarksburg called Menard's Spaghetti Inn.
And there are a lot of reasons why we love Menard's. Menard's has our heart.
Mm-hmm.
Most important is the food is delicious.
It's very good.
But I think I really love their story.
Mm-hmm.
They started their restaurant in the 1930s. The Menard family started serving spaghetti and other family recipes out of their home. And so they would invite people into their house to enjoy their family recipe. And I think the restaurant now is still where their house was.
Yeah.
They just turned their house into a restaurant.
Yeah.
I like that story in a way because it's similar to what we do when we host meals here at Lost Creek Farm. We're inviting you into our home to eat with us.
This is it right here.
I hope it doesn't completely turn into a restaurant.
Yeah.
I like living here too.
Yeah. But it's cool when you go to Menard's because you still, you still feel like you're being welcomed into somebody's home.
Mm-hmm.
The atmosphere there is really comforting like that. But, so is the food. It's like, they start you off with this soft Italian bread and you get this simple but really delicious salad. But, of course, the star of the show is always the pasta with the time-honored family recipe sauce.
Yeah, it's the sauce.
Yeah. The whole pandemic has been really challenging, obviously, for everybody. But I do think back a lot to those earliest days when it was also new and unfamiliar. And I think it was really easy to just feel kind of lost. And on top of all of that uncertainty, some of our favorite restaurants were completely shut down. And that was unfortunate because like that was a time when we really longed for those simple comforts of a place like Menards and Leonora's and all these other spaghetti houses. So, we were cooking at home a lot, and we made a lot of this pasta and a lot of this sauce from our recipe.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what kind of earned it this nickname as the next best thing.
Yeah, it's next best to going to Menards.
Yeah, that's right. Right. If we couldn't go to Menards, we
Right.
could make this sauce at home, and it was like a pretty good thing.
Yeah, next best. But this sauce is also really comforting by itself.
It is good.
Yeah, and it's a recipe. We've used it for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
It's really good.
Yeah.
It means a lot to us. It's a staple.
It does. Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to the Lost Creek Farm Kitchen. We have a really good recipe in store for you today.
Yes, we do. We are making spaghetti sauce.
Yeah, so hope you guys are ready to dig in with this. This is a hearty, meaty sauce that we really love. So with that in mind, as we talk about our ingredients, the first thing we're going to need for that is 1 pound of ground beef.
The meat. Yep. This is a local meat from my family.
So with this meat, what we want to do is we want to brown it first, and we're going to drain off any excess fat.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to step out and do that on the cooktop right now.
And as Amy is working on getting that meat browned, I'm going to go ahead and talk about the rest of the ingredients we're going to need for our sauce. I'm starting out here, though, by warming up our pot. We're going to use, I put it on about medium-low heat to start out. Okay, so we're going to use the equivalent of about 1 large yellow onion, and we're going to dice that. I've used actually a couple smaller onions today, but it works out just about the same. We are using 3 to 4 cloves of garlic. This is a little bit a matter of preference. If you like it on the garlicky side, then you might want to use a little bit more. Again, it's also a matter of size. I had some smaller cloves of garlic, so I used 4. We've got 4 total tablespoons of olive oil. Now we've got that separated out into 2 tablespoons each because we're going to be adding it to the pot at different times. One of those times is right now. I'm going to go ahead and get it warmed up so we can start to cook those onions and garlic here in just a second. Now seasoning wise, we've got a couple things here. We're going to start off with the salt. We're going to use about 1 teaspoon of salt, and this is kosher salt. Rather coarse. I do like to have more than I think I need on hand just in case I want some as I salt to taste later on. Red pepper flake. I like it to be pretty spicy. This is 1/2 teaspoon here. You can use a little bit more, or you can cut back on that if you want. Oregano. This is a good thing to talk about here because there's quite a difference between fresh herbs and dry herbs. I use oregano mostly in this recipe. Sometimes I'll use basil, but mostly oregano. The rule generally is you use about twice as much fresh herbs as you would dry herbs. Now we have some oregano out in our garden right now, even though it's wintertime, but it's not super flavorful. So I'm going to use the dry stuff, and I might use a little bit of this fresh for garnish later on. But this is about 1 teaspoon of dry oregano. And then I've got 2 tablespoons of tomato paste, and that's going to help me thicken up the sauce a little bit later on. And of course, you can't have a tomato-based spaghetti sauce without these tomatoes. We are actually going to talk about these in just 1 second because my pot is nice and warm. I can smell that oil is ready for these onions and garlic to go in. I'm just going to give these a quick stir with my wooden spoon to get them coated in some of that oil. So one thing that is kind of noteworthy about this recipe is that it's one of the few recipes where I actually advise that you put the onions and the garlic in at about the same time. So we're going to go ahead and add the garlic now. For a lot of recipes, we're looking to get the onions and the garlic cooked or browned at about the same level. And if we're doing that, then we add the garlic a little bit later because the garlic doesn't take nearly as much time to cook as the onions do. But for this recipe, I actually like the garlic to be a little bit more cooked than the onions. I just want those onions to be slightly translucent, slightly soft, and then if the garlic is a little bit brown, a little bit ahead of the onions, that's a-okay for this recipe. All right, so as we let the onions and the garlic just cook up a little bit more here in our pot, I'm going to go ahead and talk about the tomatoes, because this is obviously a very important part of a tomato-based spaghetti sauce. You can use a couple different kinds of tomatoes for this. We do a lot of canning of the tomatoes that we grow here in our garden. So we like to use, for a sauce like this, we like to use our home canned tomatoes. Now you can totally use store-bought tomatoes if you want. If you're going to do so, I recommend diced tomatoes. Now it's good if you can get the bigger can. That's a 28 ounce can, but it's totally fine also to use 2 of these guys. These are the small 14 ounce cans. And 2 of those cans, or the 28 ounce can, is just about the same as this quart jar of home canned tomatoes. You might be thinking, well, the quart jar, a few more ounces, but really once you account for the head space in the jar, works out to be about the same. Then we need about a half cup of water too. And for the diced tomatoes, whether you're using store-bought tomatoes or the home canned tomatoes, they're going to be kind of chunky. So this is another part of this recipe where you have to sort of decide what your preference is. I don't mind the chunkier sauce, but sometimes I'm in the mood for something a little bit thinner. Some people just have a preference for a less chunky sauce. If that's the case, one thing that I would recommend is to take care of that before you actually add them to your sauce. And I like to use, if I'm going to do it, I like to use this immersion blender. It fits really well right into a wide mouth jar like this. And once I have it in the jar, I'm just going to pulse it a couple times. And I don't always do this. I like the chunky tomatoes, so just a couple times. You can use a regular food processor or a blender for this too, but just be a little careful with it. Those can be more aggressive, so pulse sparingly, because you might have some pureed tomatoes before you know it, and that's not quite what we want. A little bit of texture to stay with those tomatoes. And I think my onions and garlic are pretty good at this point. We can take a look here and see that garlic is cooking just ahead of the onions, just as we want. The onions are nice and soft. Okay, so I'm going to call that pretty good. Got things browned just about where I want them. And with that, I can go ahead and think about adding my tomatoes. So I'm just going to add this whole jar right into the onions and garlic. You can take it kind of slow. Things are going to want to get kind of messy. You can use your spoon to kind of guard against that a little bit here. But you can see, like, I pulse the top of that jar to smooth things out, but I've still got a nice balance here. I've still got some pretty chunky tomatoes. That's good. That's what we want. As we simmer this away, that flavor is going to certainly change, but the remaining chunks of tomatoes are going to get softer too, and they're going to break down. And you'll see as time goes on, as I use my spoon to stir, those chunks are going to fall apart. So even if you don't blend them at first, you're going to smooth your sauce out a little bit, and it's not going to be too chunky for you. Shouldn't be anyway. All right, so I've brought this up to simmer on about medium heat, and I am going to let this cook away for about 5 minutes or so before we add the rest of our ingredients to it. Now, while we're waiting, I can kind of clean up my station a little bit, but this is actually the perfect time to remind you that these recipe videos are made possible in large part by our supporters on Patreon. And when you sign up for Patreon, we send you one of these nifty little recipe cards in the mail. Once a month, we'll send these out to patrons at the $10 level or more, and they coincide with these very featured recipe videos that we're doing today. So thank you so much, all you Patreon patrons out there. We really appreciate your support. And if you're not signed up on Patreon, but you want to get these cards, you want to support our work, we would love to have you aboard, and we are going to drop a link to our Patreon page in the description of this video. Back in a couple minutes. Okay.
I'm back, and I browned the beef, and it is ready to add to your red sauce.
Yeah, and the sauce has been cooking for good few minutes and it looks really, really good. Perfect time to combine our ingredients. So
it smells really good.
yeah, so we'll just go ahead and add that beef right into the pot.
Okay. Get the last wet beef in there.
Looks good. And then we'll just kind of fold that into the red sauce. Stir it together. Now you can see what I was talking about earlier about this being a thick and hearty sauce. So we're going to go ahead and add that water. Again, this is about a half cup. Another place in the recipe where you might want to feel it out based on preference. You may even want to add a little bit more water later on in the recipe if it seems like it's a little bit too thick for your liking. But this is pretty good. That beef looks great, smells really good, but I think this is a good time to say, you know, there are plenty of options. As with all of our recipes, they're just kind of guidelines, you know, so you don't have to use this much beef. You could cut down on it, but also you can make a darn good vegetarian version of this sauce. One thing that we've done in the past, we really like mushrooms, kind of finely chopped. Some baby portobellos are a really good variety for that, especially if you brown them first in a little bit of butter. Also, walnuts make a pretty good vegetarian spaghetti sauce. Grind them in the food processor for a minute, and really nice texture. Good protein too. All right, so we've got that combined, and we're ready to add our seasonings and get this baby cooking for a little bit longer. So maybe let's go ahead and add our teaspoon of salt first. You want to do that?
All right, yeah, you just like me. All right, so that's the salt. We'll just go ahead and add now the crushed red pepper.
It's spicy.
And then we're going to add that dried oregano.
Okay, I can just go ahead and stir that together to combine it. And then the next thing we're going to do is add our tomato paste. So again, we've got 2 tablespoons of tomato paste. And last but not least, let's just top this off with the last of our olive oil. All right, and this is unfiltered olive oil, in case you're looking at this wondering what all that sediment is. We're going to put this on a low simmer. We are going to cover it and let it just kind of hang out in there and cook away. It's going to be about an hour total. We're going to check back in about 30 minutes. We're going to taste it, see if it needs any more salt, any more red pepper flake, if we like the kick, any more water, some things like that. So yeah, we can go hang out. Maybe what we'll do is cut some fresh pasta so we can enjoy this here a little bit later. We'll be right back. So we are back after 30 minutes of cooking this stuff low and slow. Smells good.
Yep.
Huh?
Yes.
That looks great. So we're going to give it a taste here. See if we want to make any adjustments. Good. Oh, it's so hot.
That's pretty good.
I think it's pretty good. Yeah, the beef flavor has really come through really nicely. I think it's
a
just
good level of salt.
perfect amount of salt. Yeah, the herbs kind of come through. A little bit spicy.
Get the garlic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm very happy with that. So
Yeah,
let's
me
cover
too.
it back up and we'll give it another 30 minutes or so.
But you were busy
I was busy.
during that 30 minutes.
Yeah.
You made some pasta. How did it turn out?
Made some pasta and it looks really good. We're gonna cook this in the remaining time that we have here as our pasta sauce cooks. It's a nice rustic noodle that goes really well with this hearty rustic sauce. And for our Patreon patrons, we have a pasta recipe for hand-cut noodles that we learned from some home cooks here in our community. So head on over to Patreon, check it out. It's so good.
Yeah, you'll be glad you did.
Yeah.
Okay, 30 more minutes.
All right, so we are back after 30 minutes, and
The second
our
30 minutes.
sauce is looking great.
Looks very good.
We have just plated up our fresh hand-cut noodles. Ready to sauce these guys up.
Yep, sauce it up.
Okay, so maybe I'll trade you here. I'll hand this back to you and you can get some Parmesan cheese and some oregano on here for garnish.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, there's a big debate about pasta and sauce, whether you should top the pasta with the sauce or if you should mix it in with the noodles. A lot of strong opinions there, but I will say the sauce works well for either application. I kind of prefer to top it and then mix it in as I go, but it's great either way. That looks lovely.
Yeah, here, you want to dig in?
I will dig in on that for sure. So that's it, folks. That is our next best thing, spaghetti sauce with our homemade hand-cut noodles. Love this meal. This is one of my favorites, so I'm so excited for you guys to make this. Please make it at home and tag us if you do. We love to see those pictures of you guys making these recipes in your own kitchens.
We love to see it. All right.
All right.
Thanks so much for
Till
joining
next time.
us.
See ya.
See you then.
Those noodles are good, huh?